So next is the settings page. Let's take a look inside and see what we have. Here we have the lid select. So the lid select mainly works for microphones that are close to the piano, and it's designed, it's not sampled, it's emulated. So if you go to half and you go to closed, the sound will adjust according to which microphone perspective you have on. Next, we have velocities. So in order to get the velocity curves, you can turn this on. Most keyboard controllers have their own velocity curves that you can adjust and assign. That is definitely true of the Kawai VPC and probably all controllers. But it's nice within the software to have this as well. So then if I play something here with the velocities turned on, I can choose a strength. You can see that it barely takes anything for me to play it now. So in this case, it would be like... And it feels so unnatural to me because it's overly bright and on the hammer side of things. So then I would like to turn on some other microphone perspectives here to make sure that we have a little more balanced sound. And maybe turn on the player. It'll give us more balance on. So let's go back in and take a look at those settings. It's still loading. That's why we're getting the releases all over the place. The strength again, so I can increase this and... So it's overly bright, but let's do the opposite where we pull it down so that it's emphasizing the lower velocities. So you get the idea. You can also do S-curves over here, and you can see what the strength does to each of these, whether they emphasize pullback in each of those. For most people, you'll get in, adjust it on your keyboard controller, and if you need a little tweak over here, you have it available to you there. Next, let's move on to this section here. Let's take a look at pedal noise. Pedal noise. There's a round robin going on. And if you're on the mod wheel on any controller, you can adjust this when, I believe we fixed it so that continuous controller is on or off. It doesn't matter. The mod wheel will then round robin you through some other softer pedals. But by default, it's set to round robin through 5 to 7 different pedal noises, and you can adjust the volume. Now, one thing to keep in mind when you're adjusting the pedal noise is that depending on the microphone perspective, it could get noisy, right? If you have the hall mics on and you crank up the volume, you're going to hear the noise of the hall. So I didn't overly take out the noise on those, but we're including the hammer there. If I take the hammer off, then you're going to hear it more so, right? There you go, in the hall, and some rumbles and tumbles and such as you get through each of there. And so authentic sounding, right? That's how it's going to sound. It's going to have a little bit of rumble in it, but be careful of that when you're adjusting your settings. Key up. So key up is when you hold down the key, the pedal, and then you have a release, and you'll hear the key mechanism. You can hear it coming in. So chances are you want to bring it down a little bit so that it sounds a little bit more natural. It's the reason why we allowed you to crank it up is one for effect, if you wanted to use it as an effect in sound design. The other is so that you can actually hear what's happening and dial it back. So otherwise, it is a subtle sound that is difficult to hear. So it gives you a little bit of flexibility to hear it and then adjust it afterwards. Next, release. I'm going to turn off key up while we have this. Release is the sound of the hammers being released. Let's hear it again. And the ambience in the hall. You're not going to hear a smooth transition between the pedal down and release samples until you make this adjustment. It has to be set just right in order for the crossfade to work. And we've done it, set it up in a way that it sounds most natural within a specific range. So in this case, we're hearing -9 or so. So make sure that you adjust your release accordingly. Next, pre-attack, which is a little bit difficult to hear on its own, but this is the sound, and you can hear it most when you're playing slowly. This is the sound of the hammer mechanism actually going in and striking, just the sound of the mechanism before it actually strikes a key. So I'm going to crank this up, and this is going to cause a delay in my playing. There you go, you'll hear a little whip action. And that delay will go away when we press the live button. It'll happen immediately. And that is, of course, cranked by 12 dB. If you want it more naturally, it'll be at 0 dB or below. So then you can adjust it to taste. This gives you that authentic piano sound. The problem is with live, they're playing the two samples at the same time, so the actual hit and the mechanism. So it's a compromise, but when you're sequencing or playing back something, you can turn off live and it's going to have a 180 millisecond delay. Next, pedal amount. So we got continuous pedal. That's whether you're using a continuous controller pedal that was explained on the first page settings. It's identical there. Or whether you're using a switch for your sustain pedal, you can turn that on and off. Next is sympathetic resonance. This is the same as on the first page, main page as we were talking about. This is if I hold down, for example, a G and then play some other Gs. You're going to hear that resonance and come through. I have to turn off pre-attack in order for that to not have a delay. So that's sympathetic resonance. Touch response, same as on the main page. You'll see it over here, touch response. In most cases, touch response works well when it's on minimum. The reason for that is that maximum will mean a high velocity will be a high sound, and a low velocity will really turn down the volume of the piano so you can barely hear it. So it gives you a huge dynamic range, which isn't natural on a piano. A piano actually has a limited dynamic range, but it has a bigger timbral range. Next is tuning. For most people, you leave this at A440 and you'll leave it at equal temperament, but you can choose from the different types of tunings over here. One of our presets uses this to detune the piano to give you kind of a haunted sound. Next is the send reverbs. Send reverbs only work even though you turn it on, you might not hear it, because what you have to do is choose your microphone perspective. I'm just going to pull these down and adjust the reverb send for the amount. So then that's the reverb coming back from the reverb and back on. This is convolution. And you have tons of impulse responses to choose from. These are the ones taken from the sample from the actual recording session, and some other ones that I've done. And whether you're into plates or so on. Adjust the reverb amounts to taste, of course. Probably best to stick with the Hall 300 because it's 300 grand, right? It's samples taken right from that session. You also can choose algorithmic over here. If you choose algorithmic, then you can kind of create your own reverb based on size. So if you want like a room, I'm just going to crank up the reverb send so that I can hear this. Right, so you can change the size, pre-attack, pre-delay, pardon me. So that's a small, little medium-sized room, whereas this would be like cathedral, right? You can change the size of it right there, so.